Hey, what's up guys? So we're going to do a really simple beginner sculpt in Nomad Sculpt. So first and foremost, let's open up Nomad, and you might get something like this on your first Nomad project. You might have a sphere here as well. It might look something like this. First off, I don't really use the grid, this grid here. So if you want to turn that off, just press here and then tap grid. If you want to add a new shape, go here to the scene, add, and then you have your shapes here, and you can add any one you want to your project. We have our sphere, and this will probably be the body of our little character. A few other things before we get started. You want to go to the camera, and you want to make sure that scroll to the top. Just make sure that it's in orthographic and not perspective. You want it to be in orthographic. Also, if you notice that my sculpt is sort of like this reddish color instead of being white, lit PBR is when you get to a certain point in time. Then I'll usually switch it over to lit PBR for coloring and lighting and stuff like that. For now, I think metcap is better to sculpt with. So I just tap metcap, and I usually use this default one, but you can click on metcap, and you have also these other ones that you can use as well. Maybe I'll use this one. This little box here, it's easy to get turned around. So just use this little box. You can always tap it and it'll be the front. You know, if you twist it, you can tap it to the left, and so on and so forth. And this little option right here, this is your gizmo. Name of it's not important. Gizmo is kind of a funny name, so if you forget it, just remember that it's this colorful thing. You have green, red, and blue. All this does is this allows you to just move your mesh or your clay. And a mesh is whatever you're making, whatever shape it is. Like this would be my mesh. I like to call it clay, so this would be my clay.
His mama named him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay.
It's also a sphere, whatever you want to call it. So you move it around. You have all these arrows: red arrow, left and right, green up and down, and blue is, you know, front and back, things like that. This orange ring, bigger and smaller. And see these little circles that correspond with the different colors? That's how you can just stretch it in certain ways too. So let's rename this the body. You can see here there's mirror and validate. Validate just means you're committing to putting it in your scene. You know, this is our whole thing's our scene. Validate just gives you a few more options to do before you actually commit to adding the shape. We'll get to that in a second. And mirror, if you tap mirror, then just creates a mirror. 2-finger tap to undo. So let's rename this to body. So we're gonna go back to our scene where it says sphere. And you can tell it's orange. That means it's not validated. Once you validate it, it turns right. I'm just gonna tap back. So we have an orange sphere because we haven't validated. 3 dots, name, body, simple. And now we have our body. Now let's give him some sort of floor, just so we have a frame of reference. So for a floor, let's just use a square. So we're already in the scene window, add, box. So now we have our box, and it's a little too boxy. So we'll use this green sphere to shrink it down. And you notice these little points, these little dots right here. Just get rid of those for now. Just tap edit because we don't need those. And we'll just squeeze it down. Maybe we'll make it bigger, a little bit bigger, and just squeeze it down again. And now obviously it's in the middle of his body, so let's just bring it down roughly about here. And at some point in time when I was doing the demo, I must have moved my sphere off center. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to put it back on the center by going here and move origin. And you don't need to do that, but I wanted to make it, I want to keep everything in the center because that's really important for using symmetry, which I use a lot in my sculpts. So we have the body, we have the floor, but right now floor is just box. So I'm back in the scene menu, box. We can go ahead and validate it. And now we'll just rename it to floor. So we have body and floor. Let's go ahead to the body and validate it. So now we have officially 2 shapes in your 3D project. All right, let's go back to the front. All right, so let's make this a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna use that orange ring and just make this circle a little bit bigger and move it up. Something like that. I wanna make him real pudgy, the character. So something like that. So now let's go back into our scene, add sphere. So now we have another sphere here, and let's name this one legs. So we'll tap it, name, legs. Okay, it's not validated yet. We're gonna go ahead and tap mirror. And you notice that this mirror option, so anything underneath this mirror will be a mirrored object. And you'll get more into that as we go along, but just remember that if you see this mirror here and you see one leg, it's actually 2 once you move them apart. But they don't look like legs yet, so we'll move them apart. We'll shrink them with the orange ring. We'll move them down closer to little legs. So we'll move them together a little bit, and now let's just shrink them. So let's use the red sphere and just shrink them a little bit. We'll bring them a little close together now. Okay, so now let's take this green and just stretch it up. And then let's take the blue and let's make it a little longer here. Now I'm looking at it from the left side now with this blue. So I just want to stretch it out a little bit. And it's up to you how close you want the legs to be. And another thing you can do, if you want the angle a little bit different, see these rings? You can also move shapes around with these rings. Like this. So that's just another option that you have. This was the default where I was, but let's say I wanted to bring them together and bring them up and kind of make the character a little more like that. You also have that option. So we can go ahead and validate the legs and make sure that you name them. Yep, it's named legs here, so that's good. You can also rename this just so to get rid of any confusion. You can just name it legs. That way it's still a mirror, it's red, but it's just named legs. And I spelled it wrong, but I'm just gonna leave it. So we have legs. Let's add the head. And one more thing, I sort of did a loose sketch off this, and you don't really need a sketch for this tutorial, but it's a very good habit to start out by sculpting things that you're seeing that are visual references. So let's just bring in a reference. So to bring in a reference, you want to tap, is this the right one? Yep, this little picture icon, reference image. And you see my previous one here. Now you tap on the image, import, photos, because that's where I have my reference image. So I'll tap on the image, and then I'll go add, and then it pops up here. So if you want to move it around, then you just tap transform. And now you can just take your finger and just move it around as you'd like. I think something like that is good, sort of out of the way. And then just tap once, and now you're back to your sculpt. And if you need to go back and adjust it, you go back into your image layer and you can adjust it or choose a different one or transform it. Anything you like. You can even change the opacity of it. All right, so for the head, let's go ahead and tap the scene again because we're going to use another sphere. Now here's one thing to keep in mind. When I add the sphere, since I'm on the legs, it might go into this, it might become one of the children of the legs. That's kind of weird, I know. But sometimes that happens. So if I hit add and sphere, you see that it went inside. So now it's actually mirrored. But we don't want that. So I'm going to go back to scene and just long press it and bring it all the way up to the top, because the head is going to be on the top of our sculpt. And it's just easier to remember where everything is. We'll rename it head. And now let's just bring it up and let's make it bigger. And you see his head is sort of flat. So we'll flatten it out a bit. And maybe we'll just flatten it this way a little bit too. So now that we have our basic head shape, let's go ahead and validate. And then let's make it a little bit more like the drawing here. So let's just sort of pull down his little side of his head, his little cheeks, and the top of his head sort of comes to a very rounded point. So in order to do that, let's use the move tool, and we'll use symmetry so that both sides match. So let's use the move tool. It's one of my favorite tools. So the intensity is about 90%, and the radius is about 450, which is fairly big. And remember, we're looking at the front. Maybe I'll make these a little smaller, maybe like around 350 for the size. So we just want to, firstly, we want to make sure we have symmetry on. And we just want to pull down a little bit here. So something like that. I'm even going to turn on its side and just sort of pull down the back a little bit too. And let's pull down the front. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to pull down the front as well. Just because, and I might move his head a tad bit up. So remember, if we want to move the shapes around, we use the gizmo. So we'll tap the gizmo, and if you can't, if your tools aren't shaped like this, just tap this little tool icon. I might move it up a little bit, and then I might want to make this the body. Let's use the move tool again, and even though it's underneath the head, I can still squeeze it to fit. Maybe I'll make his little bottom part a little bit pudgier and just squeeze the top. Something like that. Tap this, use the gizmo. So if you notice, I tapped on the leg, and the gizmo is not really facing the way that I want it to face, because we adjusted our legs like this. So we can actually, right now we're using the local symmetry. So it's the symmetry of each of the leg itself. There's also a world symmetry. So if I just want to move it over to the right or left, an easy, quick way to do that is just to tap world. So now the pivot, the gizmo is facing the way that I want it to face, so I can move it over a little bit. And I don't have to worry about trying to adjust it with, this would be a little bit more difficult to sort of move it in the place that I want it to move. But symmetry can be a bit confusing, so just play around with it until you really get your legs where you want them. I'm going to use the move tool, and I just want to bring his belly in a little bit, because in my drawing, his belly isn't really going into his chin. The head almost takes precedent. So I'm going to tap on the belly, use my move tool, and again, as long as this mesh is selected, I can adjust it from up here. And here's another trick. If you want to just make sure, like say you want to work on the head and you don't want to move anything else, you just want to concentrate on the head, you can tap lock. That way it won't move anything else. If you don't see lock down here, then just go up here. Let's see if I guess the right one. Is it that one? Nope, it's this one. So you can just tap these 3 lines and you'll see lock here, and you can toggle it on and off and it will show down at the panel, the shortcuts button. So if I was to go to the body and then lock it, now I can really just move it. I don't have to worry about touching anything else. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and squeeze that together. So something like that. Maybe I'll raise this. Now if you make your move tool smaller, then it's a little bit easier to sort of manage your character, or to manage like how big of an impact the tool has. I think that's pretty good, but I might need to move the legs back now. So I'll tap on the legs, use the gizmo, and notice I am still on lock, so it's going to move the body. Unlock, legs, and we'll just move them back a little bit. And maybe with the move tool, I'll just stretch them back here as well. All right, so now let's add these little ear puffs. So we're going to use spheres again for that. So remember, we go to Scene, Add, Sphere, and there's 2 on both sides, so we can tap Mirror. So we'll just bring it up first, Mirror, and then we'll just adjust them like this. I'll turn it to the side so I can move them back. We want the ears to be sort of on the back. And let's flatten them out. So maybe something like that. Let's flatten them this way too. And let's make them smaller because we want this to be really round here. So let's bring it up and just bring it down into the head until we sort of get it, where we want it. So it looks like the drawing. And we don't want them straight up, so we have to rotate them a little bit like this. And then we can actually use the green arrow to bring them a little bit more into the head. And then you can adjust the width if you want. You can make the whole thing smaller. I think they're a little smaller. So maybe something like that. Let's make them a little thicker. You can go ahead and validate them. And I'm just going to tap View so I can just kind of see what we're looking at. And I think they just need to be a little bit more flattened, a little bit, stick out a little bit more. So maybe something like that. And as a nice touch, let's take our gizmo and just bend them sort of backwards. Okay, so let's go, before we start doing the arms, let's go into our scene and just organize our character. So we have this mirror here. Let's see what it is. So this is the ears. So I'm going to tap on this mirror, tap on the 3 dots, name, ears. I'm going to name the sphere ears as well. So then we have body, and then we have the legs, and then we have the floor. So let's save. So we're going to go to this first folder here, and we're just going to tap Save. Save blank. So now it's saved. Okay, so for arms and legs, there's obviously a few different ways to do these shapes. Now the tube tool is very, very useful once you get a handle on it. So that's right here. We're going to tap the tube tool, and we're going to tap Path. So the way to lay down the path is sort of weird. You have to sort of tap and then slide your Apple Pencil or whatever you're using over and then lift off. And then you have to sort of slide again. And then you can, now we have 3 dots. And that's pretty good for now, so now I'll tap this green. So firstly, let's go to edit, and this brings our dots back. The arm is sort of coming from behind, so it sort of starts here and then it comes up in the front. So you just need to make, put this sort of in that shape. You might need to, you can see I sort of roll the canvas around until I can sort of get it to look like what I want it to look like. And it's good to check the proportions, because we don't want, his arm isn't really that long. So we don't want to make it that long. So something like that is good. You can see it's very high. So I'm just going to use the gizmo and bring it down. Let's tap world and let's just bring it down. Maybe something like this. We'll tap tube again to get rid of the gizmo. Okay, so maybe something like this looks pretty good. That sort of matches that arm. And I think it'd be easy to use this shape, because we've already manipulated this, to be on this side. So since we haven't validated our tube, we can just tap mirror. And I think this will work for holding the blueberry. All right, so we also need to change sort of the shape of his arm. So it looks like his arm is sort of thin on top, and then it's nice and round and sort of plump at the bottom. So in order to do that, we're going to first tap radius once. If you tap radius once, then you can make the one end of it bigger and smaller. So, you can adjust the ends. So we'll make that, but we want to get this bigger. We want to make the middle part of his arm bigger. So you see here, radius has 2 notches. So I'm going to tap it again, and now there's 3. So now we can pull this one and make the middle one as chubby as we want. And I'm going to move this a little closer. So maybe something like that. I'm going to bring this up a little higher and make this a little thicker as well. So something like this. Those are pretty good arms. And if you want to make the whole arm bigger, remember, instead of moving all of these out, if you want to just make the whole thing bigger, just use your gizmo and just make it bigger. And you can sort of rotate and all this stuff. You can use that's one of the main things that's the most difficult, is just remembering to use the tools to your advantage. Okay, and lastly, we'll just hit spline. That makes it nice and curvy. See, now it's like a nice curve. So I'm just going to adjust it just so it's sort of matches the way that we had it before. Maybe something like that. I think that's pretty good. So once you're happy with your arm, we can go ahead and validate. Those are pretty good arms. So let's make some quick fingers on him. First, let's go and make sure that we name our arm. So we have the mirror here. And I'm just going to rename arms. And I'm going to rename the 2 arms too as well. Okay. So let's add some quick fingers to his little hands here. So I'm just going to use spheres because that's easiest. I'm going to tap head again so that the sphere will be under the head, so it's not mirrored, even though we're going to mirror it. And actually, this is a good point. We can actually drag the sphere under the arm layer. And let's change this name to fingers. So now let's drag it over, make it really small. And we'll just kind of place them using the gizmo. We'll just sort of place them where we think they need to go. So I think something like this works. And you can go ahead and, if you want to make the finger a little bit more finger-like, you can stretch it. You can make it a little thinner, like this. And then you can just sort of adjust it as you wish. So I think something like that is pretty good. Now, we like where this is. I think it's a good point for our first little index finger. So I'm just going to validate it. And then I'm going to hit clone. So once you hit clone, then you can just move this finger off. And it just makes it a lot easier to make the rest of the fingers. You just have to adjust them. And this can be a little tricky at first. But you just have to adjust them until you're happy with them. So maybe something like this. And I'm actually going to make them both a little bit smaller. So I'm going to select them both in the scene, gizmo, and then just shrink them. And I kind of want them both to be on the more of the top part of his hand. So I'm just going to slowly adjust both of them at the same time. And honestly, this is just like twisting and moving, and you know, you really just have to get used to the gizmo. As you see, I'm pretty decent at just twisting them to get them where I want them to go, but that'll just take time. Now I'll go back to one and just adjust one at a time if you need to. I think that's pretty good. So let's make the thumb. So I'm going to tag, I'll just use the gizmo, and I've selected the one pointer finger, clone. Now I'll just make the thumb. Okay. I'm just using the gizmo to sort of maneuver it in the right position. Again, the gizmo can be very tricky at first, but the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. Okay, so it's the thumb, so we'll put it sort of inside the hand a little bit. I think something like that. Although it sort of doesn't read like it's bent over, so I'm just gonna make it like a regular thumb. I'll just sort of keep it open like that. I think that's probably better. Okay, so we have our fingers, and they look pretty good. So I'm just going to select them all and then join them. So now we have all of our fingers. Okay, so I think that we can actually bring these fingers outside of the arm. So I brought the fingers outside of the arm because the fingers are only on one side. So now we have our fingers. Now for the arm, I'm going to go ahead and validate. So I've tapped on the arms. I'm going to validate. And you see keep instances and join children. And I'm going to do keep instances. So now we have arms, but now we have both arms. And they're both separate. So this arm I'm going to bring up underneath the fingers. And I'm going to join these two. because they go together. So now we have one whole arm with the fingers. So I'm just going to rename it to arm 1. And we got a crash. So as you saw, I got a crash. Don't know why. It happens. That's the importance of saving. So again, I'm going to make these all into fingers. I'm going to join these and rename them fingers. I'm going to save. Okay, so we want everything to be independent. So these fingers I'm going to bring out of, this arm should not be connected to the head. So the fingers I'm going to bring out of I'm just going to bring them all the way to the top. So now we have our fingers only on one side. Now for the arms, I'm going to select them both and then validate. Keep instances, join children. So we're going to keep instances. Yes. So now we have arms. I'm just going to save. I always save. Anytime I get a crash, I'm just really nervous, so I always like save it afterwards a lot. So now we have the arms, and these are going to be both arms. So the arm that correlates to the fingers, which is this arm, long press, and I'm just going to drag it up over the fingers. We can connect the fingers to it. Why not? And we can actually join these two. Let's join those. So now we have the arm with the fingers, and we can rename this arm 1 if you hadn't already. That way we don't get it confused with the other arm. The other arm, I'm just going to bring out of this little blue thing, and I'm just going to delete this. We don't need that anymore. So now we have arm 2. Okay. Okay, so now that we have our arms pretty much squared away, we have arm 2 and arm 1. The blueberry is going to be in arm 2. So we might adjust that. This is a good thing to show you as well. Even though we joined the 2, you can still separate them. So for arm 2, you can press the 3 dots and you can do separate. And now we have I'm not sure how it separated both. Or they instanced? Oh, they were instanced. Interesting. Okay, so basically what just happened is, and I've noticed this happens sometimes, so the arms were instanced. So confusing though. I don't even know how I'm going to explain that. Well, anyway, the arms were instanced since they were made from mirrors. Sometimes they become instanced, so whatever you do with one will happen with the other ones. So even though I was on arm 2 and I was trying to separate them, it separated both of them, arms 1 and arms 2. So to keep that from happening, I'm just going to press back. Just go to both of them and hit uninstance. Okay, and it didn't even show up for arm 2, so we should be good to go now. So now we're back on arm 2, 3 buttons, 3 dots, and separate. So now you can see the arm and the 3 fingers. So now we can just deal with all of those. So that's the beauty of just joining. You can always separate them later. And I didn't want to have to really get into that, but sometimes some things happen and I have to like show you how to fix them. Even though I try to keep certain things simple, but there's certain workflows and certain things you do that it just kind of becomes complicated. So I'm just going to slowly go through when things like that happen so that hopefully you'll be able to follow my steps and not get stuck. But if you get stuck, just let me know. I'm here in the comments. All right, so arm 2. I'm going to rename this arm 2 just so we're not confused. Arm 2. So this is the arm. These are all the fingers. So let's just rename these to finger 1, fin 2. I like to just keep it short. Fin 3. So now we have the arm and the fingers. So let's just make a circle here, a sphere. So I'm going to tap arm, sphere. I'll just bring it up. We can validate it. We don't need to make a mirror of it. But now let's just put it in position. So I'm just dragging it over to proper position, which is sort of like he's holding it in his arm. Maybe around here. I think is pretty good. So it sort of looks like he's holding it tight. Now we just need to adjust it so it looks like his face is sort of pressing into it. So we'll use the move tool. It doesn't need to be that big. Maybe like 150 or so. Let's start there. So we tap on the blueberry. Let's call it a blueberry. Name. Blueberry. All right, so you can see symmetry is on. We don't need symmetry on because we don't want everything to move symmetrically. So we'll turn symmetry off. And now we're going to lock it. So we tap lock. That way we're only dealing with the blueberry shape. So you can see it sort of goes into the head here, goes into the body here. Now we have to sort of just, if we tap solo, you can see the whole thing. You have to sort of just guess where the shape is, and then you have to just push it with the move tool. So sort of like that. And same thing here, we just kind of want to push it. And you can even solo it if that helps, and you can sort of just push it some more once you kind of know where it is. I'm just sort of pushing it. And I don't really want this much of a gap here. See that little gap? I want it to look like very soft and malleable. So I'm going to sort of close off that gap, and I'm going to sort of make it a little rounder and puffier here. And I'll make my move tool a little bit bigger. So maybe something like this. Maybe I'll push it out a little bit more. So maybe something like this. Now you can see that it sort of looks more like the face is pressing on the blueberry is pressing on the face. It doesn't look like it's directly going into the head. So that's the reason why I use the move tool, and I just pushed it out from the, from inside the head. I push it out a little bit. Just to give that illusion that it's that it's two pieces sort of resting on each other. Versus going through each other. Okay, so now we just have to deal with the arm. So let's tap on the arm, take it off lock. We'll tap on the arm, and we'll use the move tool again, and we want to sort of bring it to about here. So let's make the move tool a little bit smaller, and then let's sort of just adjust our arm. I'm going to turn symmetry off. We don't need symmetry. I'm just going to adjust the arm so you can see a little bit of it on the front. I think that's pretty good. I just sort of dragged it down a little bit to maybe something like this. Just so you can see a little bit of it, and you can see it's a little bit lower than this side. So that's a good start. And now we can just do some more spheres so it looks like he's holding it. I might actually make it a little bit smaller. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's get rid of these fingers, because we actually don't need these fingers. So I'm just going to select them all and I'm going to delete them. So we just have the arm. Let me save. So now we can just put our spheres, maybe 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go here, add, sphere. I'm going to bring these spheres all the way up. I'll just call it fin for now, and I'll validate. And now we can just move it into place. And as you can see with my drawings, these are just sort of smushed spheres. Okay, so we'll sort of move them into place. And then I can flatten them a little bit. And I'll sort of just stretch it out, just so it sort of matches the other fingers. And I'll just tilt it and put it kind of where the thumb might be. So maybe something like that. And now I'll just use that one and I'll clone it. And again, this can be kind of tricky, but you just want to sort of put them right on the edge. Rotate it, push it in. So you want it making contact with the blueberry and his little hand. So maybe something like this. So let's clone this one. And then we'll just use our gizmo. And this one I'm going to keep a little bit closer to the other finger. I'll rotate it. So maybe something like this. I'll adjust this a little bit. So maybe something like this. So now let's make the little petals, the little leafy bits for the blueberry. And for this, we'll use a different shape. So let me save this. And let's go to our scene, add, and we'll just use a cylinder. So let's bring our cylinder out in the front and up just so we can get a good, whoops. You can tap edit to get rid of those little nodes and just drag it up. And we're just going to flatten it. So maybe something like that. Let's bring it out a little bit more. And now let's take one of our little red spheres and skinny it up a little bit. Just so we have a little shape like this. That's pretty good. And we can actually go ahead and validate it. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. So now we just want to give it a little bit of a bend. So let's go to our symmetry. So if we're tapped on there, you see symmetry, you can see the two dots. That's just showing what the symmetry is. So the symmetry is right down the middle. And if this helps, you can go to your symmetry tool, you can scroll down, and you can do show line and show plane. So now you can see what the symmetry is. So this line is what the symmetry is reading off of. So anything I do on this side will happen on that side. So if I want to sort of make it so this part is rounder and this part thins out down here, I can do two things. Use the move tool so I can sort of move it like this and move this out. The only problem is once you turn it like this, you see that it's not clean. So one way to help that be clean is you go to your symmetry and you tap, see the planes here, you tap the green. So now anything that happens on the bottom or the top is also on the bottom. So now let's do the same thing. We're using our move tool and the radius is about 350. We can probably make it a little smaller, maybe like 300. And then I'm just going to drag this in like that. And I'm going to drag this part out. And just make it nice and round so we have sort of a shape like that. Now I want to make the move tool really big and push it up, but we can't do that with the green symmetry. So we'll go back into symmetry and turn that off. So now I'm going to make the brush really big and I'm just going to push on the underside until we get a nice curve like that. So now we'll just use our gizmo and we just have to position it sort of like coming out of the top. So we'll move it over. Make it smaller eventually. And we just have to move it into position. So I kind of want them flattened, but sort of popping out a little bit like this, maybe a little smaller. And remember, you can also use these little spheres and stuff if you want to shrink it up or stretch it or anything like that. Okay, maybe something like this. Let's see how I have it in the drawing. In the drawing, it's something like this. So why not, let's just keep it like that. I just want the tip to go to sort of be on the surface of the blueberry. So I think something like that looks pretty good. And then we can just use our gizmo and clone this. And then we can adjust them. If I want the wings to be a little thicker, the leaves, I can stretch them out like that. I think that's pretty good. I'll stretch this one out as well, make it a little thicker. So maybe something like that. I'm going to make them both a little bit smaller. And I'll use the move tool and I'll just, maybe I want to just adjust them one by one. You can always use the move tool and just sort of move them around manually, so to speak. So let's add another one. So I'll make sure I tap on this one, clone. And I'll just adjust these. Oops. You always have to be careful when you accidentally tap another mesh, because sometimes you can move it out of place and not notice. It's happened to me quite a few times, actually. Okay, that looks pretty good. I would like a little more of a bend in them. And maybe one more, so I'll clone it. And I'll just sort of add it in here. Maybe something like this. And I'm just going to adjust it just so it's not coming out of his cheek. Yeah, something like that looks all right. I think that looks decent. And this one, I just want to move, do world. I just want to sort of close up that gap a little bit. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. So this is what mine are positioned like. And you just have to move one by one until you sort of get them where you want them. And it's a little tricky, so make sure you take time to get it how you want it. And then save. Okay, so let's make some eyes. His eyes are closed here, so let's make some closed eyes for our little character. And we'll use the cylinder for this. So we go to our scene. And let's go to the top and just add cylinder. I'm just going to bring this to the top. All right, so let's bring it up just so we can see it. And now I want you to tap snap here. So tap snap, and if 90 isn't in here, then tap on it and put 90. So what snap does is it will snap, once we rotate this, it will only move 90 degrees. So that's why you know that it will be exactly perpendicular. I think that's the right word, because that's what we want. So we'll just take the blue sphere and we'll just sort of bring it together like that. Okay, we'll tap mirror, and then we'll just separate these two. We can sort of shrink them down a little bit, make them smaller, and we just want to sort of put them in the general position of the eyes. Sort of figure out the general position and general size. So I'm thinking something like this. Seems like there's plenty of room for the mouth in the middle, and there's plenty of room on the sides of the head. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and just straighten up our scene, because I noticed that it's a little bit crazy here. So we have our fingers. So let's go ahead and join our fingers. Just these three. We have our blueberry. We have our arm. Okay, this is the other arm. So this arm, let's bring it up. And then we have our fingers. So just make sure that you have the right shapes. I'm going to join these. So I'm going to rename this Arm 2. And I'm going to save. So now we have Arm 2. We have the cylinder we just made, which we can rename to Eyes. Okay, we have the blueberry. We have the other arm. I'm going to put it underneath. Arm 2, Arm 1, blueberry, cylinders. These are the leaves. So let's join all these cylinders together. Make sure you don't have anything else. See how I have arm selected? You don't want that. You want just the parts that you want to join. And I'll rename these petals. Petals, I think. Is that how you spell flower petals? So now we have the petals, we have the blueberry. If you want, you can link them up together. We have the arms, and we have the eyes. Good. Let's go ahead and save. All right, so to make these little slanty portions of the eyes, there's actually another way that it might be easier, now that I'm sort of looking at it. But I'm not exactly sure. So for the first way, this is how I would normally do it. So I'm going to take the eyes and I'm going to go ahead and validate. I'm going to select them both and just validate it and join children. So now we just have both of the eyes together. So let's tap on the three dots and clone. We'll rename this Eye Erase. So for the eye erase, notice that the gizmo is all the way down here. I'm not sure why it does that. Just go to pivot, reset, pivot, and it'll bring it back up. You can turn off snap. We don't need it. So now we have eyes, eye erase, and we've selected eye erase. So let's bring that down. Oops. Let's bring it down. We'll stretch it forward and back like this. And then we're going to also stretch it this way with the red. Let's tap symmetry and bring them closer together. So something like this. If you want to have a better view of what I'm doing, I'm going to select them both and bring them both out. So this is kind of what's going on. And this part is going to be the eye. So you can adjust it. Let's go to the top eye. Again, the gizmo is down there. Pivot, reset, pivot. So maybe I'm going to stretch it out a little bit more. I'm going to tap symmetry so I can use them symmetrically like this. Maybe I want to make them a little flatter. And maybe I'll just turn them a little bit like this so that the back side is a little bit wider than the front. So I'm looking at this because this is going to be the eye up here. This bigger one is what we're going to erase. So once you're happy with that, I think this is a good shape. Then we'll just go to our scene. We'll highlight both of these, eyes and eye erase. And we're going to turn eye erase off. Now, if you can't do that, if you tap eye erase and the other one goes off, this is what's happening. Go to advanced and uncheck sync visibility, because when that is on and you tap this, the other one will go off. So just remember, let's turn them both on, go to advanced and uncheck sync visibility. and then turn off eye erase. And it should look something like this. So let's go ahead and save before we do this. So now eyes is still visible, eye erase is invisible. We'll do voxel, and we'll remesh at about 200. And now you see we have just the part that was showing before. So now we'll slowly move this into the head. And you can see it's not exactly the right shape. So we'll probably have to do a mixture of turning it like this. And maybe that's all we have to do, is really just turn it like that. But another trick I like to do to get it to be the shape of the head, I'll just use move, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe around 250. And then I'll just sort of move it out like this. And then I'll move it back into the head. And I'll go back to move and just sort of adjust it. Maybe I'll make the move tool a little bit smaller. And I'll just sort of adjust it like this so that it's even going into his head. Like that looks pretty good. So something like this. And you can adjust it as you like. I think they need to come down a little bit further. So just feel free to adjust them until you kind of get them where you want it. I think that's pretty good. One thing I notice is that these are sort of angled a little bit more, so I'm just going to try to angle them up a little bit more. Something like this. And if you find they're too arched, you can just flatten them out like this. So it does take some time, but you know, it's really fun once you don't have to really worry about the tools. It's basically just learning the tools. And that's why I sort of go through these extra steps, because that's the most important part. It's just learning the tools and getting things to be the way that you want them to be. So let's make these two little teardrop type things. These will be like right here and here. We'll do them the same way we did the petals. So we'll go here, add cylinder. So we'll bring our cylinder out, snap, which we kind of don't have to snap actually, but we actually don't have to snap it. We can just bring it up, flatten it, and now we just need to go ahead and make that same shape that we made before. Let's make it smaller. Let's mirror it. We'll move them off to one side. So we can validate this for now. We'll go to symmetry, and we want to do that same symmetry we did before. Because right now, all we want to do is sort of make this teardrop shape. So now this is the top view looking down. I'll use the move tool. A little bit bigger, maybe like 300. And I'm just going to just slowly sort of try to shape it the way that little teardrop is. So that's round on the top, and then sort of like pointed on the bottom side. So it's a lot of push and pull, but I have faith that you'll be able to figure out, you know, how to get it in your shape. I can show you, but I don't know how to make it easier. You know, it's just like, it's kind of tricky. It just kind of takes getting used to. But I guess that's what this tutorial is. You kind of, you know, kind of forcing you to do a lot of this stuff. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So I'll go back to my gizmo. I'm going to turn off this green symmetry because sometimes I'll forget. And before I put it in the head, I'm just going to put a little bend in it the same way we did the petals. I do that a lot. So I'm just going to sort of push on the underside, just so it's a little more spherical. Now we'll just position it into the head. So maybe something like this. Now we just have to find, there it is. And I just have to adjust it a little bit, rotate it until it's like, looks like it's on the surface. So maybe something like that. I can make them a little smaller. And I'll just pull them up a touch. And you notice, like, if I want to pull them directly up this way, this is a little tricky, so I'm going to go to pivot. I'm going to take it off world. And that actually helped. Actually, I don't need to go to pivot. I was on world before, but if I want to use the local symmetry, just turn world off and you can push it up. Now, symmetry and all that stuff is very confusing, so try not to be too thrown by that kind of stuff, because it is very, very tricky, and that'll just take time with getting to know the app. I feel like they're a little high. Okay, I'm happy with that. So let's use 2 spheres to make the eyes of the blueberry. So that's pretty simple. So I add a sphere. I want to bring it up to the top so I don't get it confused with anything. And might as well go ahead and validate it. And this is going to be blueberry eye. All right, I'm going to save real quick. So we're in blueberry eye. Let's just move it into position. So something like this is actually pretty good. It's a pretty good placement. Something like that. So now let's go ahead and clone this, and we'll just put the other one, we'll just sort of play it by eye. Maybe I'll move it over a little bit more. See, this is where the symmetry gets weird. And if I just want to move it a certain way, you can tap pivot and you can adjust the pivot tool. So like if I want to just bring it down, I can adjust where these arrows go. That makes it very easy. I'll tap pivot again, and now I can just slide it over where I wanted it to go. Maybe a tad bit more. So something like this. Maybe a little bit closer. And now we just have to add this little line here for the mouth. And I think for that, we can just use, Let's use another cylinder. We can go ahead and join these eyes real quick. And let's rename this closed eyes so we don't get confused. Really, so I don't get confused. And what is this mirror? Oh, this is the eye. I call those eye dots. So let's go ahead and validate that and rename it eye dots. Those are those little things we made. Eye dots, closed eyes, blueberry eyes. So we'll add a cylinder and we can go ahead and validate it. We'll move it out, we'll shrink it, we'll move it closer to the mouth. Oops, and we'll zoom in. We'll shrink it again, and we'll stretch it. Okay. And now let's actually, we can try to smooth it, but I might need to make it a little more dense. So basically, what I want to do is I want to smooth it, but I want the symmetry to be correct. So I'm going to tap symmetry here, and I think I might need to tap them all. Yeah, I'm going to tap all of these planes and then smooth. I'm going to smooth out both ends. So something like that. I'll take a closer look. Make sure it's not looking too crazy. I think it looks good enough. So now we can go back to our gizmo. Let's get rid of those symmetry marks. And now we just have to sort of put it in the middle of the eyes. We'll shrink it. Let's take a look at the image. It's really small, really tiny. We want to put it right in the middle. So something like this. And I want to use move because I want to put a little bit of a bend in it. So I'm just using the move tool, and we're just gonna, I have to take it off symmetry because I don't want it to be on the top and the bottom. So I'll just put a little bit of a bend in it. Like this. And I'll just bring it back up to the middle. And just check the size with the drawing. It can be a little bit smaller. And this is a little bit extra, but I'm actually going to pull it out this way so it has the bend sort of like this sphere, the blueberry sphere. And it's a little extra, but you know, I'm a perfectionist. So for example, see how this is too close to that eye? I want it to be perfect. Okay, there we go. Maybe even a little higher. You're now seeing the depth of my being neurotic when it comes to this stuff. Okay. And all this looks a little bit big. So I might just make it all a little smaller. I think that looks a bit cuter, more cute. I'll save. All right, so to make the mouth, we'll use a cylinder cut in half, and we can do another boolean operation similar to what we did with the eyes. So let's add a cylinder. Okay, I'll move it out so you can see it. And we can go ahead and validate it. So we'll bring it up, snap, we'll rotate it forward, turn snap off, and we can shrink it a little bit. So now let's tap the front view, trim, rectangle, and now we'll just draw a rectangle and cut it in half. So now we'll just take our gizmo and move it into position. Right between the eyes, so maybe something like this. I think it looks pretty good. And then we'll move it into the head, like so. And this is a little extra, but sometimes I don't like it to be perfectly round like that. So I'll take the move tool, make it small, turn symmetry on, and just sort of pull out this a little bit. Something like that. I feel like it's not as clean as I want, so I'm just going to trim it again. Rectangle. I'm just going to trim this so it's clean. There we go. All right, so now we have the cylinder, and then we have the head. So we want to select both of those. We want to make the cylinder invisible because that's the shape of the mouth. I'm going to save before I do this. All right, and now we're just going to voxel, and we'll remesh to 200 is fine. Okay, and then we have something like this. You can see it gets all crazy, so we'll fix that by smoothing it all out. When you smooth out the mouth, just try not to be too rough, just kind of smooth it out softly because we don't really want to lose a lot of that shape. So now I'm just moving my canvas around and just smoothing out all those ripples, ridges. Okay, I think that looks good. Okay, so now let's start to bring our shapes together. So for the ears, if you want to put a little bit of a, sort of like a little impression in the ears, that might be kind of cool. Let's use clay. And so we're using the clay tool and sub. The intensity is about 60 and the shape is about 80. So just make sure you're on the ears. And you can sort of just make like a shape like this. You can sort of just go like that and then take smooth, and then you can smooth it out a little bit. Then you have a little bit of an impression there, which is kind of cool. So it's either we have it just flat the way it is, or you can make the impression like I had it before. So now let's bring together the ears, the head, and the body. But one thing, we want to keep our symmetry. So what's really important is that we go to the ears and that we validate them. Join children. So now we have the head, the ears, and the body. So we can select all of those and then voxel remesh at 200. Okay, so now we just have the body. I'm going to bring that up top. Do a quick save. Okay, so the reason why I had to join the ears is because if you voxel remesh all of them together, but you don't join the ears first, it might take one of the symmetry from one of the ears and it'll mess up the symmetry. Okay, so now you can see our little lines from where we fused all this together. So we'll just smooth that out. And make it nice and clean. And do the same thing underneath the head. And you can see if it's a little pixelated here, and just go ahead and smooth the rest of his little butt out, or anything else that needs smoothing. Okay, so also you can see that this isn't the cleanest. The mouth isn't the cleanest. So we'll take pinch, and the intensity is about 55, radius is about 75, and we're just going to sort of pinch this together. By pinch together, I just mean going over it with the pinch tool. So this will sort of make the mouth cutout way more clean. Okay, something like that. And this is another little extra piece. I'm going to go to inflate, another one of my favorite tools. So I'll go to inflate. I'll make the radius about 80. And I'm on the body here. And you see I'm just turning my canvas so I can just make a little sort of just a little something like that. Just sort of a little like skin fold. I like to make things like this. And I just sort of smooth it out a little bit, just to sort of give it some life. Again, I'm always doing some extra stuff like that. Okay, so for the arms, we're pretty happy with the arms. Let's tap on the arms and voxel merge those together as well. So we have the arm. The whole thing is together, but we still want to voxel merge. We're at 200. Okay, so now it's remeshed. You can see it's a big difference now. So we just need to smooth it out. Symmetry doesn't need to be on because it's only the one. And you can see how smoothing sort of made the fingers a little pointy. If you don't like that, then you can use the flatten tool, and you can go over the top. Oop. I don't really like when the fingers are too pointy. So I'll just flatten out those two little fingers. And I might even flatten out this part too. The flat part. And then I'll just smooth very lightly. Just smooth out the mesh a little bit. Okay, so now for this part of the arm, I want to just bring this to the body. So we'll just use move and just kind of drag it into the body, like so. So now that we have this into the arm, I want to do inflate and make a nice like little skin fold above it, but it's too high. So if I do the skin fold, it's gonna eat into the top of the head. Now what I should have done is probably done this before I merged the two, but I still don't know if that would have helped. So I'll just show you for an example. If I try to do it now, it's going to be sort of an issue with the top part of the head, like that. So what I'm going to do instead is bring the arm down a little bit. So I'm going to use move. I don't need symmetry because the arms aren't the same. So I'm going to use my move tool on the arm. And I'm just going to lower the arm the tiniest bit. So just enough so I can get a nice skin fold. So now I go to inflate, I'll tap the body. We can lock it so we don't have to worry about drawing on the arm. So now we can just do a nice inflate all the way around the arm. I'll maybe go back over it so it's a little more. And just do a nice skin fold like that, and then smooth it out. Just something like that. It's so hard to just make a simple tutorial because I want to do so much details. Okay, so now we're on this guy. So firstly, we have to sort of adjust this thumb because I can see that it's sort of come out from its original area. So let's take arm and let's separate. Let's find this thumb. So here's the thumb. And we just need to reposition it a little bit. I'm actually going to take this little white. So now we can deal with this arm. First, we'll voxel merge everything together. So we'll take everything with this arm and voxel remesh it at 200. And then smooth it out. You can turn symmetry off. We don't need symmetry. If you can't get all the wrinkles out, all the ripples out, then you can voxel remesh at a lower number. At a lower number will make the clay less dense, in turn making it softer. But 200 is usually pretty good. Sturdy enough so you don't lose the shape, but soft enough to where you can usually smooth it all out. So we have to do the same thing. We'll use move and bring this arm a little closer. Okay, I think something like that is probably pretty good. I see this crease here that I want to smooth out. And now we'll just grab our inflate, we'll go back to the body, and we'll just add a nice skin fold. Right over the back of his arm. And we'll smooth it very gingerly. Something like that. All right, so let's put some little teeth in there. So I think we can just use a, probably use a sphere. I was thinking a sphere or a cylinder, but we'll use a sphere. And we'll just shrink it. We'll shrink it that way, and we'll shrink it up this way. Go ahead and validate. Let's go front and let's trim it. So let's trim a rectangle and just trim this extra off. And then we can just move it into place. course, you can adjust it as you see fit. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so before we color him, the only thing I wanted to do is trim off the bottom so his feet are flat. And since we're down there, I'm going to show you another little trick. So if we add another sphere, let me go ahead and save this. So we've added another sphere here, and we'll name this Feeties. We'll mirror it. Let's bring it down, shrink it up a lot, move it over, and then move it up. So now you can just sort of use the tools, like we'll stretch it out, maybe stretch it out this way a little bit. If you want it to be flatter, you can just bring it down. So this sort of gives us sort of like he has little feet. You can make the feet bigger or smaller. You know, you can do a lot just by adjusting the shape. I think I like them sort of small like this. I think I like them like this. If you want to make them a little bit pigeon-toed, you can also do that. So what I was saying before, so now we want to trim. So we'll take the feet, because if we lose the floor, you can see that it's circles. So we're going to use this as a trim point. Whoop, let's make it a little smaller. So let's go ahead and validate those. And now we'll take the trim tool, make sure that we're on the feet, rectangle, and we want to trim it right underneath. I usually do a little bit lower than where it meets the floor. So I usually leave a little bit of a gap. Same thing with the legs. Make sure you're hitting left so you're perfectly level. Trim, rectangle. And again, I'm not going right up to the line, just a little bit underneath, like that. And now he has like two little feet. And you know what I love? I love to do little like folds. So let's see how it looks. If we do one sort of over the foot. Just a little something. Why not? Okay, and I put this little curl in there. So let's use crease. Let's make it pretty small. Let's see how it looks. It doesn't look too bad. But let's turn on dynamic topology. So dynamic topology enabled. You see it here. Symmetry's off, and we're using the crease tool. I'll do the front view, and let's see if this looks better. Kind of looks the same. Let's see if it looks better if I zoom in. There we go. So let me turn off dynamic topology and just see if it looks better. No, we still need it. Okay, so let's just make our little curly Q here. It's a little big. So something like that. Dynamic topology just keeps you from having to make the whole density of the whole body greater. It'll just raise the density around the tool that you're using. So it's very useful, but you want to remember to turn it off. Turn it off, because if you try to smooth and things like that with dynamic topology is on, sometimes it can react not so pretty. So we'll just smooth this out a little bit. I'm going to give them a little tail just for good measure. Really quick, I'll add a sphere. I'll bring it out to the back, make it a little smaller. Maybe around there. We'll validate. Trusty move tool. Symmetry. Just pull it out a little bit. And maybe put a little bend in it. So maybe something like that. I'll just kind of move it. Make it a tad smaller. So something like this. This also helps if I ever get it printed, it should stand a little easier too. And I just want to bring these two ends together a little bit more. And then I'll tap the body and do one of my little folds. Oop. Turn symmetry on. Smooth it just a little bit. Okay, just a little tiny tail, why not? Yeah, do lighting, coloring, and then post-process, but I'll keep it fairly simple. You've heard that before. Okay, what is this mirror? So this is the feeties. So I'm gonna go ahead and validate these and rename this feeties. Okay, and for the feeties, yeah, I think we're good there. So now let's change it to lit PBR. So we'll go to this little window here, the shading, lit PBR. Now it's completely white, and I'm going to save. And I'm also going to save as. So now I have a copy of this one. So now I want to select the eyes. You know what? Let's go ahead and join the eyes together. So this is the blueberry eyes. Let's bring that to the top. And the blueberry, let's also bring that to the top. Let's put those all together. So now we have the blueberry, and this is all him. So let's tag the feet, the body, the sphere. What's the sphere? Oh, this is the teeth. Let's rename it. What did I just rename? Teethies. So we don't need to actually grab that. Let's grab the feet, the body, the cylinder. What's the cylinder? Oh, that's the mouth. This is the blueberry mouth. This is why it's good to label everything. All right, is there anything else? Eye dots, arms. Let's go ahead and join these arms. Join, arms, eye dots, closed eyes, teethies, body, feeties. The legs, we can go ahead and validate. Join children. And let's join the legs and the feet. legs and feet. So let's rename this legs, feet. Okay, legs, feet, bodies, arms, and this is the tail. Sorry, I thought I renamed everything. Arms, body, legs. Okay, so body, legs, arms. Let's go to white. Probably did that too fast. Okay, so body, legs, and feet. We're going to go here. And now we're on white. And I want to take the roughness down a little bit to maybe something like this. Maybe 0.304. Paint all. Maybe a little bit more, actually. 0.425. Paint all. And I want to do the same thing with the blueberry for now. So I'll just do paint all. And the petals, paint all. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So now let's go to our light menu here. Turn off the environment. And just so you know, I use a very particular environment, this one here. So the link's in the video, you can download it. If you want to download it, just go here, click here, import photos, and then you just find it where you downloaded it, and then it'll show up down here. But for now, we're going to turn that off. We're going to save. We'll go back to our lights and add a light. Okay, let's rename this W1. So W1 is a directional light coming down from here. I think it looks pretty good. We can probably make it a little bit brighter. And let's change the shadow softness. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's add another one. So let's add light. This can be W2. Now this light, let's hit the gizmo. We'll bring it over this way. It doesn't matter where we place it. Directional lights, it all depends on how you maneuver this. So now we're going to go to this side. We're going to spin it around. And we just want to give a nice shine to this side of him, like this. So now I've just added that other light to this side. So we have the light here, all these nice shadows, and then you have another light. Sort of filling in a little bit of those shadows, like that. And I actually want to make him a little bit rougher, his body. So I'm going to take body again. And I'm just going to up the roughness a little bit. Because see how shiny it is? I don't really like that. So I'm going to bring it up to maybe around there. Paint all. I don't like that shine. It makes it look plasticky. Like I don't like that plasticky look. So even these, paint all. So I think that's good for now. So let's do a light from the top down. So I'm going to position him in the middle. So something like this. And I'm going to tap front. So this is a pretty decent front view. So go to your little camera and do add view. Now we have front center. So now we have a front center view. And even though we're on orthographic, we can change it to perspective. So let's change it to perspective. You see it changes a little bit. That's because of this, the focal number. But I'm going to bring it down to maybe like 12 or so. So I'll bring that down to like 12. And I think that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to do save. So this will replace. It'll replace the front center orthographic with the front center perspective. So all we did was just save the view. So if we need to change something and we want to go back, we can just do front center. So let's add the light from the top looking down. So let's move this back. We'll go to our lights here, add a light, rename, top, down. We'll change this light. So we'll tap on this little icon, spot, and then we'll use the gizmo so we can move it. So now we'll move it up. Let's make sure it's right over him. So once it's right over him, then we can sort of just adjust it so it's pointing straight down. Top front. Okay, that's pretty good. And we want to make the cone angle a little bit bigger, because right now you can see there's a shortcut here to see the cone angle. Let's move it directly to the middle. But it's the same thing as if we press this little shortcut. Whoops. If we press this little shortcut and we do cone angle, it's the same thing. And I tend to make this a little on the blue side, so I'm going to move this up. I tend to do the top down a little bit bluer. So let's do that. And now we want to give him a hard edge. So for our last light, we'll rename it edge. We'll tap here. We'll make it completely white. We'll raise the intensity. Let's make it a spotlight. And we're going to put it behind him. And then spin it so the light is on him. Oh, sometimes it's a little hard to see. There it is. So once you see the light on him, just raise the intensity. So I'm going to press this, press the options, and I want to raise the intensity so it's really bright. Okay, so when we go to front, when we move this light around, you can start to see that really sharp edge. So if we move it here, there we go. So if we move it out, you get that really sharp edge there. That's what we want. So we can put it there, or you can bring it to this side, and you can put it here. I don't know which side I like better. I guess this side looks better because it's darker. Okay, that looks pretty good. It probably doesn't need to be that bright. I can lower the intensity a little bit. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So now let's bring back our environment. So we'll tap on our lights again. We'll bring back the environment. This is way too bright. So down here to exposure, we're going to bring that down. So maybe something like this. And I noticed that the tail was still not the same color, so I want to match it. So I'm going to tap the color, tap this little eyedropper, tap his skin. So now I have the skin color and texture, Now I'm going to tap the tail, tap the color, and tap paint. So I just matched the rest of the body with the tail. All right, I'm also going to go through my lights, and I just want to check, I just want to check the shadows for the softness. Because I think I prefer them all to be softer shadows. Okay. And another thing I want to do is change the material. So I'll tap on the body and change the material here to subsurface. And then I'm going to lower the depth a little bit to maybe like 1. We need to do the same to the arms and the legs. Oh, and the feet, I suppose. Oh, the feet are attached to the legs. I forgot. So let's do the same thing with the blueberry. Subsurface. And the petals. Subsurface. All right. I guess we can make the eye dots subsurface as well. All right, let's save. And I'm not going to go too crazy coloring him. So let's just try to figure out a nice color for him. Maybe like a nice mocha color. But there's so many to choose from. Oh, maybe something like this is nice. Maybe a nice orange. So these I want to make a little bit lighter orange. So I've just tapped on the color. And I'm just going to go a little bit lighter and paint. Now for the eyes, another thing I noticed is I didn't really straighten these out, but I didn't really smooth them out that much. I'm not sure that I need to, so let's see how they look with a really matte black. You might not be able to notice that they're not perfect. I don't think you really notice too much. For the teeth, we'll go with a fairly glossy white. Let's make that subsurface as well. Blueberry. We'll change them to a nice blueberry color. Let's bring the roughness up. Not sure what color blue I want them. So maybe something like this. I could try to figure out colors forever. So this, let's make it like a nice sort of muted green. Something like that. And this is completely in his face. So I might have to use move to get it out. Okay, it's sort of scrunched, but I think it kind of works. I don't mind, just as long as it doesn't look like it's really going into his face. I think that works. Okay. All right, we have the environment. Maybe I'll make the environment a tad bit lighter. Something like this. Let's get rid of our reference. So we'll tap here and get rid of the reference. And let's make the ground something like this, maybe. Oop, forgot the tail. So you can also go to the paint tool and just hold your finger over the color. Paint all. Let's make it a little bit darker. Okay, so now I guess we can join the eyes and the mouth. You can join them. Let's take this light out, because I'm not sure why the lights even get linked to different parts. But now we have the mouth. Let's go ahead and save. And let's make those maybe we don't even need to make them completely black. Maybe something like that. And what about the background? That's a decent background color. I think the color is 436C6B. 436C6B. It's a decent color. And now we can just adjust the lights a little bit. So top down, can probably make a little bit more intense and change the color a little bit to match. Actually, maybe it just looks good white. But maybe the edge light, I want to match the environment because that'll really help him fit in. So the edge light, maybe we'll change this to more. Let's move it over so you can see. Maybe we'll change this light to better reflect the environment. Oh, let's get rid of this. I'll resave. The only thing else that we do is post-process. And post-process just really shows you how your sculpt looks. The main things, I always keep these on because I know that my iPad can handle all this. That's just the highest resolution. A reflection, global illumination I usually keep on because it sort of keeps it from the shadows looking too black. It's sort of like the light bouncing off different things. Ambient occlusion, Let's turn off depth of field for now so you can see the whole thing. Ambient inclusion is sort of like these shadows and stuff like that. So sometimes I like to take these down because they get a little too heavy. Can leave curve bias up. I'll take the overall strength of those shadows down some. That'll make it a little bit more lively. Depth of field is really cool, but it's like you just have to make sure that it's not like this. Maybe you want to turn it down less. But for now, I'll just leave it off, I think. Bloom deals with like lights hitting it. If you want things to be really shiny and give off like a glow, then you would turn the bloom all the way up. This is just adjusted because I feel like when I bring stuff over to my computer, it always looked a little bit more faded like this. So I adjusted this. So now it just stays on. I just adjusted the saturation and contrast. You can play around with that. Color grading, curvature, all this stuff you can play around with. I do like a good vignette, but you know, probably not needed for this right now. And once I'm happy with everything, I'll just go ahead and hit save. And then we'll export. There is one last thing I wanted to do before we export, is just color in the mouth a little bit darker. So I'm going to tap on this, add a layer, inside mouth. I'll go to my paint tool, I'll grab this color, tap the color, make it darker, and all the way matte. And then I'll just take my paintbrush, this, let me just make sure I'm seeing all the way in there, and then just color it in darker, because I don't really need it to be the same color. So I'll just make it a little bit darker in here. Doesn't even really need to be that far out. So this is just to give some depth. And another quick thing that we can do while we're here, so I'm going to take the color of this, and I should say, as I'm doing these edits, I should just turn post-process off and do the edits without. So I just took this color again. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Same thing. And I'm going to take crease, and I want to go back over this little part here. So I'm going to do, where is it? Dynamic topology again. Crease tool. And I'm going to turn symmetry off. And now I'm just going to trace this. Oops. Oh, make sure that you tap here so that there's no line through your color. So now I should be able to go over this and it should color it in darker. Okay. I can probably make it even darker than that. Okay, there we go. Now I'm happy with it. So I'll turn post-process on, save. I always save before I go to export. Front and center, folder. And we'll go ahead and do 4K. I'll tap the little button here, the little share button, and then save. Save image. Done. Okay, I'm not that good at turntables, but let's see if we can get it. I wish there was an easy way to do them. Let's see if this works. maybe that's the best I can do. All right, so that's my little character. I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial. Let me know what you guys think. I believe this is gonna go to YouTube. It did take me a while, so sometimes I like to put my longer ones on Skillshare. I'm not sure yet, but I don't know. This was originally intended for YouTube, so I might just put it on YouTube. All right, well, keep drawing, keep sculpting. I will see you all in the next video.